trauma, specifically complex and unresolved childhood trauma. So let me tell you a story. Let's imagine that there's a little girl and her name is Susie. And Susie's in first grade, which means that she's about 6 years old. And one day Susie goes to school and all her little 6-year-old girlfriends are really mean to her and she doesn't understand what this is about. It's very distressing. It's a kind of a trauma for sure, because Susie at 6 years old doesn't know how to navigate what's actually going on. She starts thinking about how great it's going to be to go home and kind of get folded up in mommy's arms. So she's looking forward to going home at the end of the school day, and she does, and she walks into the house and she says, "Mommy, Mommy." Now here's what Susie doesn't know. The backstory is that Susie has a little brother, and that little brother has been extremely sick the whole day, vomiting and has diarrhea. And the mom is going out of her mind, back and forth on the phone all day to the doctor, worried that the baby is going to get dehydrated, worried that she might have to take the baby to the hospital. So mom doesn't have very much bandwidth left. And Susie comes home and she's, "Mommy, Mommy." And Mommy says, "Susie, can't you see I'm busy with your little brother? Don't bother me. Go outside and play. Susie, go outside. Don't bother me right now. I'm taking care of your little brother." In that moment, we are noticing a traumatic event for Susie. Because in that moment, Susie goes, "Huh," and unconsciously, because this is how the human brain works, and none of us cannot do this, because this is happening all the time, and it's happening below the level of conscious awareness. And in that one moment, Susie goes, "Huh," and her brain goes, "What just happened, and what does it mean to me about myself?" Unconscious. The child is not aware of this at all. And so the unconscious mind makes a story to explain the feelings that Susie is having that are attached to the mommy saying, "Susie, don't bother me. Can't you see I'm with your little brother? Go outside and play. Can't you see I'm taking care of your brother?" What just happened? What does it mean to me about myself? And between you and me, it never means anything good. So the brain makes a story. We have a traumatic event. "Mommy, Mommy, go outside and play. Can't you see I'm working with your little brother? I'm taking care of your little brother." It's a story. Maybe there's something wrong with me. Maybe mom likes my little brother more than me. Why didn't I get my needs met? I must be a bad girl. Maybe mom loves my brother more than me. Maybe mom doesn't love me at all. Maybe. Fast forward. Because I had a great need and my need was shut down and I feel ashamed of having even asked for mommy's help. There must be something wrong with me. I need to be different than who and what I am. Remember, traumatic event. Go outside and play. Can't you see I'm taking care of your little brother? Unconscious story. What just happened? What does it mean to me about myself? There must be something wrong with me. I need to be somehow different than who and what I am. Fast forward, unhealed and untended, that story becomes a limiting belief. I'm not lovable. And we all have hundreds and thousands of trauma story beliefs. But these trauma story belief schemas or patterns that all of us have, it's impossible not to have them, begin to drive what we think, what we feel, what we believe about ourselves, and how we behave. And in a great tragic reveal, this is like 90% of the population, maybe even 95 or 97% of the population, which I will call the walking wounded, being trauma-defined, trauma-limited, and trauma-identified. And I am here to remind each and every one of you, we are not the events that happen to us. And a large piece of the trauma is what meaning we place on the event. And we are placing unconscious meaning in our unconscious stories on events that happen that we experience as traumatic all the time. And imagine for a moment, what would it really feel like to live your entire life believing that you're not lovable? The dreaded uncomfortable, the dreaded heartache and pain. I'm not lovable. And we have a whole series of distractions. We have addiction, we have pornography, we have shopping, we have gambling. You name it, it can be used as a distraction. And so to change our felt experience of ourself that is directly correlated to a traumatic event, rather than tolerate the uncomfortable or the shame or the guilt or the pain or the confusion, we dissociate, i.e. we distract from it. Trauma, story, belief. And we have hundreds and thousands of them. And I am using this example of Susie, which I use often, because it's a great illustration of how this works. And imagine, what if for every single traumatic event that is experienced in your nervous system, in your emotional body, we are building negative story after negative story after negative story. I've never met a patient once, nor can I speak from my own personal experience and say to you, never once has anybody built a positive story as a result of trauma. So we have to identify trauma event by trauma event. And we have to understand what really happened, not what our story has convinced us that happened. What was the actual factual occurrence? Fact, Susie's friends were mean to her that day at school. Fact, Susie at 6 years old doesn't have the capacity to navigate what it felt like for not understanding why her girlfriends were mean to her. So she seeks solace, she seeks support, she seeks empathy and understanding from mom. Mommy will make it better. But mommy's not available to make it better, leaving Susie somewhat stranded in her own emotions of distress and overwhelm. And as children, we're just trying to understand what happened. So we build a story, trauma, story, belief. With hundreds and thousands of these trauma, story, beliefs, patterns, or schemas, in other words, we are now being guided through the course of our entire life, being trauma-driven, trauma-defined, and trauma-identified. Again, I remind you all, we are not the traumatic events that happen to us. The meaning that we place unconsciously upon the event is where we get stuck, being trauma-defined, trauma-driven, and trauma-identified.